Hi there, my name is Philip Ideson. I want to welcome you to the Art of Procurement podcast, the podcast that helps you, a forward-thinking procurement professional, position yourself and your team to proactively take advantage of the revolution that's taking place in procurement today. By interviewing industry trailblazers and sharing insights from our own experiences, my team and I pull back the curtain and shine a light on the strategies, tactics, and tools that procurement teams are using to elevate their impact. And this week on the show, I'm joined by a longtime friend of Art of Procurement, Rendi Miller. Rendi is the VP of Strategic Sourcing and Procurement at Zendesk. Rendi is a passionate supporter of procurement and procurement communities. I first met her as part of the Silicon Valley Sourcing Leaders community that she co-founded during my time living in California back in the early days of Art of Procurement. And Rendi and I finally got the chance to jump on mic at the recent ProcureCon Indirect West event in Phoenix, which was an event that I certainly thoroughly enjoyed. Now we discuss Rendi's experience in building a procurement group in a high-growth environment, and importantly, how she looks to future-proof their strategic role in times of significant change and disruption. So let's go into the show, where I start by asking Rendi if she found procurement or if procurement found her.
Procurement found me. I took a job as an executive assistant to the VP of Indirect Materials at a manufacturing company. And I was a single mom with 3 kids, and I quickly learned that being an executive assistant was not for me because I had enough people to take care of in my life. And so a buyer role came available in the organization, and I raised my hand and I said, I'll do that. Yeah. I'll do anything other than what I'm doing today. And so that's really where I started. I started at the very bottom of procurement and got a great foundation in all things procurement and especially at a manufacturing company. Everything has an SOP. There's an SOP for the SOPs. And so I was really grateful for that foundation that I have, particularly when I went to start a procurement organization at a startup where there was nothing. I had spent 13 years at the manufacturing company and found, as painful as all of those things were, they all meant something. Yeah. And I was able to take a lot of that into the building of the function at a startup. And, you've got a lot more flexibility, obviously, with a startup. But it was good to have that foundational background. And started as a buyer and worked my way into being a senior commodity manager, and then left there after 13 years and went over and started in the tech space. How
was it going from a manufacturing company, which are very traditional, and I've worked in manufacturing companies as well in procurement, and like you say, there's kind of a process for everything, to tech and growth, which is blank sheet of paper. Yes. I mean, that must have been a pretty big transition.
It was a big transition. And like I said, having that foundation was so good. But you have, especially at a startup, there were no guardrails. There was nothing that, said you have to stay within this box or in this lane. So I could do things any way I wanted to. And I think what was most eye-opening was the pace of which things move at a tech company, and particularly at a startup tech company that was growing over, between 30 and 40% year over year. And so it was very freeing to be able to do things the way I wanted to do them and build things the way I wanted to build them, with the things that I, one, know are critical, and 2, those things that are really important, and then leave some of the heavy process stuff behind and make things a little bit more nimble and things like that. So, and I think because of the speed of a tech company, you have to be nimble and agile and be able to move quickly. So you have to be very thoughtful in the types of processes and things like that you're putting in place for the organization.
Yeah, and you've got a completely different value proposition when you're in a high growth tech company startup than you do when you're in a manufacturing company, where every cent, every percentage point makes a big difference. In that tech firm, high growth, it's not about saving money, is it?
Right. It's not. There's so much more that goes into that value proposition that you're speaking of. And I was fortunate to spend my career in the manufacturing space in services. So I knew that it was not so much just about, all the bottom line on cost. It was more about the quality and things like that. So, and that's very much how, what plays into things primarily in a SaaS space, because I think there's the relationship. We look at things actually in a four quadrant perspective. We look at obviously cost, but then we look at a technical fit, and we look at the strategic fit. So how are they going to fit within our organization, and then we look at executive alignment as well. So those are the four things that we are, or functionality.
I think that's going into like your sourcing decisions, or as you're looking at, whether somebody is fit for your organization and whether somebody you want to bring in.
Yes. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit today about building a vision and really looking at what vision you have for procurement and building a vision for procurement, and then working backwards to then start executing on that vision, because I know it's something that you've spent a lot of time on, in your role at Zendesk. And my first question really around that is you're kind of planning out the future. How do you kind of decide and look at, this is what procurement's going to look like in 2, 3, 4 years time? Like, what are the things that you're looking for that determines your kind of future vision for procurement?
Yeah. Well, one, I think we have to be careful how far out we look, because things change so rapidly. And but it's always important to have a goal in mind and have a vision and know where you want to go. Because if you're not looking to where you want to go, you're going to either go backwards or you're going to just stay stagnant as to where you are. So, and I think wherever you are in your career and in the growth of the company that you're at, and culture of that company all plays a very important role in that. But for me, my vision today is in 2 years from now, my goal is to have the gold standard for a procurement organization. And so what does that mean? It's easy to say that. I'm sure every procurement leader wants that, but what does that actually mean? And it means, moving from being an order taker to being a strategic partner, being a consultant to the business, being able to evaluate when is it important to really do a very structured RFP, and when can we just go and talk to a few vendors and get a feel for what they're doing, maybe do a POC, and then move on from there. But I think that my vision is looking at how do we continue to mature, and how do we continue to embed ourselves into the business as really being that critical factor to consult the business, partner with the business, and really make them successful. And
you talk about the gold standard, and I think one of the things that is a challenge, perhaps something that we have done as a profession that has not necessarily helped us, is we look at we'll read these reports and we'll see, oh, well, this is the gold standard, this is the best practice, and we all try and strive for that. But it's not necessarily best practice for your organization. So how much does the culture of your own organization kind of play into what gold standard means?
I think it plays a huge part in it, because you do have to adapt to the culture of your company and the leadership of the company and where the company is going, and also the growth of the company. How rapidly is the company growing? So you've got to keep pace, and you've got to know where the company is going. And I always say, we can't plan for today. We need to plan for when our company has a goal of being a $5 billion company in the next 3 years. So we can't be thinking about $5 billion in 3 years. We've got to think about $5 billion today, and be planning, what does that look like today? Otherwise, I don't want to be a step behind all the time. I want to be a step ahead. So
no, and that drives as I'm sure as you're looking into your supply base, how do you find providers that are actually going to help enable that transition as well? And that some providers are probably more suitable for a company that's at a lower revenue range than a higher revenue range, and perhaps maybe we've got to develop them and help develop them, and that's part of our remit, to help them come on the journey with us too.
Yes, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we do in making sure that we are being open with our vendors and making sure that they know what our vision is. I partner very closely with our CIO, and we hold an annual vendor summit. And that is the time where we open up and we say, this is what our roadmap is, this is where we're going, this is what we need you to come along and help us with. And so without them knowing what our goals are and what our objectives are for this year, for next year, for 3 years down the road, we can't expect them to help us, and we need them to help us. There's a reason that they have been selected as our strategic partners. And so, being transparent and being open and sharing, obviously not confidential information, but everything that we possibly can, we not only help them be successful partners, but we help them make us successful as well.
I'm sure that plays into then how you become a customer of choice for them, because so often you get that black box and procurement doesn't share where you're going, where the vision is, and so they're operating kind of in this silo, whereas you're actually laying everything on the table and challenging them to help you on this journey.
Yeah. It also, we tell them, we make this very clear, we've laid out our roadmap. We've told you what we need to do. We told you what's important to us. Bring us ideas that are going to help us, be successful in this. Do not bring us an idea that's, out here on the horizon that has nothing to do with what our roadmap is, because you're wasting your time and you're wasting my time. So the whole reason that we're setting this stage for you and giving you this opportunity to know and understand what we're doing gives you the opportunity to bring those ideas to us, and makes a whole lot better use of all of our time.
How involved are you with your executive team then to help set kind of that vision? And why I ask that question is we sometimes struggle to truly understand, aside from, investor presentations and things like that, and maybe things that have come down in terms of company strategy, and we rely on that without actually having the conversations with our execs to understand truly what the business strategy is. How much do you engage with the senior leadership to understand their strategies so you can distill that into what procurement can do?
I mentioned the relationship that I have with our CIO, and we very much partner together in what that vision is going to look like. Obviously, there is a direction that the company is going that comes down from our executive leadership team, and I think rather than there is some influence, but it's more how do we execute on that strategy? And so putting together plans for that execution, and how do we make that possible? And what does that actually look like in a tactical manner? Because you've got to have a playbook for how you're going to execute on those plans. And I think that's more where we come in, or where I come in partnering then with the leadership team to say, okay, this is what we want to do as a company. How do we make that happen?
Right.
And what does that mean for your organization, marketing, or our CIO, or our, chief people officer? What does that look like specifically in your organization?
How do you think about bringing that down then into measurements? I'm thinking about, traditionally a lot of procurement folks are measured on savings and savings alone, even if because that's what the ROI, the business determines that the ROI that we're going to determine on the investment in procurement is based on savings, because oftentimes the business, that's the only thing they know on how to track us on. How do you balance the objectives of your team and the measurements of your team with all these different kind of priorities that different areas of the business has, so that you're kind of driving the right behaviors?
Right. Being measured on savings is never going to go away. We're always going to be measured on savings, and that's okay. It's a good thing, and I don't mind that at all. But I think there are more levers to pull. We call it work better together at Zendesk. And so what does that mean? So how are we looking at efficiencies, whether that be in soft savings or value add to contracts, or how are we looking at end-to-end processes and starting to take things out of the process that aren't value add, and how much time are we saving? And we're not looking to save time or eliminate resources and cut heads or anything like that. But there's so much work to do in a growing organization that you're never looking to eliminate people.
It's more, how can we do more with what we've got?
Exactly. And how do we eliminate those, because the non-value add processes or pieces of the process, I think it's really important to continually look at those things, because we're all evolving. The business is evolving. The business is growing. And so we need to continue to adapt to the needs of the business at the time.
Right.
And also looking ahead.
Right. You talked about processes, and I know internally you've got a motto about how you can make things beautifully simple at Zendesk.
Yes.
So how do you apply that to the procurement process and simplifying, ultimately the services that you're providing internally to the rest of your stakeholders?
Yeah. Zendesk is a company that we create software for customer relationship management and customer intelligence software. And our whole mantra from the very beginning is to create beautifully simple software and a beautifully simple experience for our customers to use our software. So taking that into procurement, I look at every employee in the company as my customer as well. And so how do I make the process of engaging procurement beautifully simple? And so it starts with the process and making sure that it's easy to use, you know where to go. There's transparency. There's you know exactly where your project is or your contract is at any moment of any step of the process. And but it's also, I want people to feel like they've got a white glove experience without actually having people assigned to white glove it all the way through. But I want them to feel like this is easy. I want to engage. I don't want them, I'd rather come to me and ask for permission and engage early rather than say I'm just going to ask for forgiveness, because we know there's plenty of those around, and sometimes people think that's easier. But I think it starts with the process, and it really does, for me, start also with a mindset with my team that we're here to help and we're here to engage you, not wait for you to come to us when you've got a problem or you need something, but really becoming part of their business and partnering with them, knowing what they need, helping them figure out what they need before they know what it is, that type of thing.
Kind of being proactive, being very proactive.
Absolutely.
Because we complain something, and I think of my own career, earlier in my career, I'd be complaining and everybody around me and my team would be complaining that, how we just brought in at the end and how they're not following the process and all those things. And, it's only kind of as I matured, I realized, hang on a minute, we've got to be providing a service that's so valuable that they want to come to you. Rather than just sitting back and waiting for somebody to come to you, because they're not going to. They don't. We're interjecting ourselves in their process of going and buying something. So we shouldn't just expect that they're going to come and ask us for some help.
Absolutely. You've been in this business a long time as well. And we used to always say, we're fighting for a seat at the table. How do you get a seat at the table? How many conferences did we go to? And there were sessions on getting a seat at the table. And I said, I've told my team, we need to set the table. We need to be the ones who are arranging the dinner party and, inviting the guests in and saying, this is the agenda, this is what we're serving today. And, really, we need to create that type of environment rather than waiting to be asked. And I think that is a lot more meaningful and goes a lot farther in creating that partnership with our stakeholders.
Yeah, I love that, because a lot of times they don't know what to expect. So what they think they should expect from us is what the experience they've had before, which may have been a negative one, or what they've perceived as being the role of procurement because that's what we've projected for so many years.
Well, I think too, when they think we're not buying anything right now, so we don't need procurement at the table with us. And so we're just talking about what we're going to do. And if we don't understand what they're talking about or what they want to do, when we get brought into, because now they want to buy something, it's like, well, why? What's the plan here? What's the strategy? Why are you buying this? What do you need it for? What is it going to do? So, like I said, I think setting that table and bringing them to us and making sure that we're all engaged, setting those agendas, is going to go a lot farther.
I loved what you talked about, the customer experience and the stakeholder experience. We've talked a lot about that this year so far on Art of Procurement, because I think it's really pivotal to the role of procurement, that we have to be providing a positive experience for them as they go through the buying process.
Yes.
And you also talked about white glove. You want to give that perception of not the perception, you want to give the experience of white glove treatment without necessarily having the resources behind it to be able to do that on a one-on-one basis.
Right.
So how much does technology play? Like, how do you look at technology being an enabler of being able to provide a white glove service without obviously you having to have somebody sat waiting for the email to drop, or waiting to do it all manually in the background?
Yeah, technology is critical to that piece of it, and having the right type of technology. And there are so many options out there today, which is really wonderful, because I remember the days. I remember when Ariba was hot on the press, and that was probably the only other option that you had other than Oracle or SAP at the time. And it was a game changer, an absolute game changer in the industry. And there's so many of them now that, for whatever your type of business is or whatever size your business is, there's plenty of options. But I have always been one to look at what I have internally and see what can I use, because, as I said, there's so many. You could buy an application for every piece of the buying process that there is. But I have at Zendesk, I've used our own tools. We are not a procurement intake tool, but we have been able to use our own technology to formulate that process and that intake process, and make sure that it's transparent, that our employees are accustomed to using Zendesk. And so it just makes sense for them to continue on in that. And like I said, while Zendesk is not a procurement intake tool, it is an amazing platform that we have been able to configure to do just that. And we're able to share with our legal teams, with our security teams, with our architecture review board, all within our own platform, and then have integrations within our P2P systems.
I'm sure that helps your adoption when it's your own tool.
Absolutely.
No one definitely has an excuse for not using it.
Exactly. Yes.
As you started on your journey and setting up basically a procurement function from the ground, you talked about coming into a startup with no procurement function. How do you think about evolving and building the brand of procurement? And what are you here for, and how you enable people? You're not here to. You shouldn't be a threat to people, because there's a lot of folks who are starting at that ground level and like, okay, where the heck do I even start? So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you kind of started on that journey to build procurement into what it is today.
Yeah. I think procurement is really based on relationships and trust. And so for me, when I was in that position of starting things from the ground up, the first thing I did was start to build relationships and start to understand what the needs are of the leaders within the organization, and then some of what I could help them do and how I could help them achieve their goals, or extend their budget a little bit further, that type of thing. But I think that relationship is so critical, and it has to be built on trust. And then you start with little wins, and you build on those, and you start to share those wins with other leaders in the company. And you find your champion, and so often it's within IT, because that's where the most opportunity is, particularly in tech companies. And if you can get in really close with your CIO, your head of IT, anything like that, and start to kind of chip away at some of those things, it's kind of the engine of the whole company. And so those things start to kind of permeate into the rest of the organization as well. But building relationships and getting a champion, that helps to build your brand. And then also making sure that you're building a team that is really going to be dedicated to serving the business as well, and partnering with the business, I think, is really important. And as a leader, I think it's so important for us to model the behavior that we expect out of our team. It's kind of like, as a parent, you want to
set a good example.
Yes, exactly. So, I think showing others how to build those relationships if it doesn't come naturally to them is important.
I mean, and my last question, you've talked about the CIO relationship, and anybody, it could be a different executive stakeholder that somebody needs a relationship with. I just wonder, how a lot of times that relationship can be adversarial, or a CIO can look and there's so many larger companies who go and build their own shadow procurement organization, essentially in IT, because they look at corporate IT and think, I'm not really sure what value they're adding to me. What are the things from an IT or CIO perspective you think have really helped you to position yourself as that business partner, as opposed to the CIO going off and kind of doing their own thing?
Yeah. One, I think just building the relationship, and I do not have an IT background.
Right.
So I was not coming in and saying, I know how to negotiate this deal for you or that deal, or we can do better here or there. It is not my forte. I have always made sure in every organization that I have led that I have a very strong IT person on my sourcing team, because I know that is not my forte.
Yeah, you need that expertise.
Yes, exactly. And so, I think also leaning into their expertise, the CIO and her team. I work with a female CIO, work with her team today, and making sure that I'm leaning in and I'm understanding and I'm learning from them. They're going to bring an element of expertise to the business, but me and my team are going to also bring a level of expertise to the business in terms of negotiations and how to, deal with the vendors and things like that. But I think, back to building relationships and trust, I think being able to be transparent about that and saying, this is not my area of expertise, but I'm here to partner with you and I'm here to understand what is important to you, and I'm going to make sure that we deliver on your priorities.
Yeah, these are the things that we can do aside from, we're not going to come and tell you how to run your business.
Yes.
But there are the other ways that we can, knowing what your goals are, there are other things that we can do to help enable them.
Yeah.
Well, Rendi, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the pod today. It's been a pleasure to chat. Here we are live at ProcureCon in a makeshift room, the podcast room that had no table. So if anyone's listening, visualize a few chairs stacked up on each other with our microphones popped on top.
We've learned to get very creative over the last 2 years, haven't we? So
you got to do what you got to do.
That's right.
My last question that I always ask is, if anybody would like to connect with you directly, find you online, where is the best place for them to do that?
Find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Happy to chat and connect with anyone there.
Great. Well, I will put your LinkedIn or a link to your LinkedIn profile on our show notes page for today's episodes. And folks who are listening can find that at artofprocurement.com/podcast. That's artofprocurement.com/podcast, and just search for Rendi and you will find this episode. So one last time, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Phil, for having me. I really appreciate it.
If this episode struck a chord with you, please do send it to somebody. We grow here at Art of Procurement through word of mouth, and that would be really appreciated. You can also support us by giving us a thumbs up, a star rating, or a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Since 2015, we've built the world's largest free resource for procurement professionals looking to elevate their impact. Our resources span podcasts like this, videos, blog posts, papers, and events. To join us on the inside and to ensure you never miss an episode, a webinar, an event, or a post, please do subscribe to our weekly newsletter, This Week in Procurement. You can do that at artofprocurement.com/subscribe. That's artofprocurement.com/subscribe. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.